June. I don't know if it's because Commander Jameson has taken pity on me, or if she really does feel the loss of Matthias, one of her most valuable soldiers, but she helps me arrange his funeral, even though she's never done that for one of her soldiers before. She refuses to say anything about why she chose to do it. Wealthy families like ours always have elaborate funerals. Matthias's takes place inside a building with soaring, Baroque archways and stained glass windows. They're covered with bare floors with white carpets. Round white banquet tables overflowing with white lilacs fill the room. The only colors come from the Republic flags and circular gold Republic seal hanging behind the room's front altar, the portrait of our glorious elector looming above them all. All the mourners wear their best whites. I have on an elaborate white gown, laced and corseted, with a silk overskirt and draped layers in the back. A tiny white gold brooch from the Republic seal is clipped on its bodice. The hairdresser piled my hair high on my head, with loose ringlets cascading over one shoulder and a white rose pinned behind my ear. Pearls line the choker wrapped around my throat. My eyelids are coated with glittering white eyeshadow. My lashes are bathed in snow, the puffy redness under my eyes erased by shining white powder. Everything about me is stripped of color, just as Matthias had been stripped from my life. Matthias once told me that it was not always this way, that only after the first floods and volcanic eruptions, after the Republic built a barrier along the waterfront to keep the colony's deserters from fleeing illegally into our territory, did people start mourning for the dead by wearing white. After the first eruptions, he said, white volcanic ash rained from the sky for months. The dead and dying were covered in it. So now to wear white is to remember the dead. He told me this because I'd asked him what our parents' funeral was like. Now, I wander among the guests, lost and aimless, responding to the sympathetic words of those around me with appropriate, practiced replies. I'm so sorry for your loss, they say. I recognize some of Matthias's professors, fellow soldiers, and superiors. There are even a couple of my classmates from Drake. I'm surprised to see them. I'd never been good at making friends during my 3 years in college, considering my age and my hefty course load. But they're here. Some from afternoon drills, and others from my Republic History 421 class. They take my hand and shake their heads. First your parents, and now your brother. I can't imagine how hard it is for you. No, you can't. But I smile graciously and bow my head, because I know they mean well. Thank you for coming, I say. It means a lot. I know Matthias would be proud that he gave his life for his country. Sometimes I catch an admiring glance from a well-wisher across the room, which I ignore. I have no use for such sentiments. My outfit is not meant for them. Only for Matthias do I wear this unnecessarily exquisite gown, to show without words how much I love him. After a while, I sit at a table near the front of the room, facing the flower-strewn altar that will soon be occupied with a line of people reading their eulogies to my brother. I bow my head respectfully to the Republic flags. Then, my eyes wander to the white coffin next to them. From here, I can see just a hint of the person lying inside. You look lovely, June. I glance up to see Thomas bow, then take the seat beside me. He's exchanged his military clothes for an elegant white-vested suit, and his hair is freshly cut. I can tell the suit is brand new. It must have cost him a fortune. Thanks, you too. That is, you look well for the circumstances, given all that's happened. I know what you mean. I reach over and pat his hand to reassure him. He gives me a smile. Looks like he wants to say something more, then decides against it and turns his eyes away. It takes a half hour for everyone to find their seats, and another half hour for the waiters to start arriving with plates of food. I don't need anything. Commander Jameson sits opposite me on the far side of our banquet table, and between her and Thomas are 3 of my Drake classmates. I exchange a strained smile with them. On my left side is a man named Chian, who organizes and oversees all trials taken in Los Angeles. He administered mine. What I don't understand is why he's here. Why he even cares that Matthias died? He's a former acquaintance of our parents, so his presence is not unexpected, but why right next to me? Then I remember that Chian had mentored Matthias before he joined Commander Jameson's squad. Matthias hated him. The man now furrows his bushy eyebrows at me and claps a hand on my bare shoulder. It lingers there for a while. How are you feeling, my dear? he asks. His words distort the scars on his face. A slice across the bridge of his nose, and another jagged mark that goes from his ear to the bottom of his chin. I manage a smile. Better than expected. Well, I'll say. He lets out a laugh that makes me cringe. His eyes look me up and down. That dress polishes you up like a fresh snow blossom. Takes all of my control to keep the smile on my face. Stay calm, I tell myself. Chian is not a man to make into an enemy. I loved your brother very much, you know, he continues with overdone sympathy. I remember him as a kid. You should have seen him. He used to run around your parents' living room, holding out his hand like a little gun. He was destined to enter our squads. Thank you, sir, I say. Chian saws off a huge piece of steak and shoves it into his mouth. Matthias was very attentive during the time I mentored him. Natural leader. Did he ever tell you about that? A memory flashes through my mind. The rainy night when Matthias first started working for Chian. He had taken me and Thomas, who was still in school, out to the Tangashi sector, where I ate my first bowl of pork edamame with spaghetti and sweet onion rolls. I remember the two of them were in full uniform, Matthias with his jacket open and shirt hanging loose, Thomas neatly buttoned up with his hair carefully slicked back. Thomas teased me over my messy pigtails, but Matthias was quiet. Then, a week later, his apprenticeship with Chian ended abruptly. Matthias had filed an appeal, and he was reassigned to Commander Jameson's patrol. He said it was all classified. I lie. Chian laughs. A good boy that Matthias was. A great apprentice. Imagine my disappointment when he was reassigned to the city patrols. He told me he just didn't have the smarts to judge the trials or organize the kids who finished taking them. Such a modest one. Always smarter than he thought he was. Just like you. He grins at me. I nod. Chian made me take the trial twice because I got a perfect score in record time, 1 hour, 10 minutes. He thought I had cheated. Not only did I have the only perfect score in the nation, I'm probably also the only kid who has ever taken the trial twice. You're very kind, I reply. My brother was a better leader than I'll ever be. Chian shushes me with a wave of his hand. Nonsense, my dear, he says. Then he leans uncomfortably close. There's something oily and unpleasant about him. I'm personally devastated by the way he died, he says. At the hands of that nasty boy. What a shame. Chian narrows his eyes, making his eyebrows look even bushier. I was so pleased when Commander Jameson told me that you'd be tracking him. His case needs a pair of fresh eyes, and you're just the doll to do it. What a gem of a test mission, huh? I hate him with all of my being. Thomas must notice my stiffness because I feel his hand cover mine just under the table. Just go with it, he's trying to tell me. When Chian finally turns away from me to answer a question from the man on his other side, Thomas leans toward me. Chian has a personal grudge against Day, he whispers. Is that so? I whisper back. He nods. Who do you think gave him that scar? Day did? I can't keep the surprise from my face. Chian is a rather large man and has worked for the Trials Administration for as long as I can remember. He's a skilled official. Could a teenage boy really wound him like that? And get away with it? I glance over at Chian and study the scar. It's a clean cut, made with a smooth-edged blade. Must have happened quickly, too, to be such a straight line. I can't imagine Chian holding still while someone sliced him like that. For a moment, just a split second, I'm on Day's side. I glance up at Commander Jameson, who stares at me as if she's reading my thoughts. It makes me uneasy. Thomas's hand touches mine again. Hey, he says, Day can't hide from the government forever. Sooner or later, we'll dig that street brat out and make an example out of him. He's no match for you, especially when you put your mind to something. Thomas's kind smile makes me weak, and suddenly I feel like Matthias is the one sitting next to me and telling me everything is going to be okay, reassuring me that the Republic won't fail. My brother, had once promised to stay at my side forever. I look away from Thomas and toward the altar so he doesn't see the tears in my eyes. I can't smile back. I don't think I'll ever smile again. Let's get this over with, I whisper. Day. It's gaudy hot, even this late in the afternoon. I limp through the streets along the rim of Alta and Winter Sector, along the lake and out in the open, lost in the crowded shuffle of other people. My wounds are still healing. I wear the army trousers our caretaker gave me with a thin collared shirt. Tess followed in a garbage bin. My cap is pulled low, and I've added to my disguise with a bandage patch over my left eye. Nothing unusual, really. Not in this area of workers with factory injuries. Today, I'm out on my own. Tess is keeping a low profile several streets down, tucked away on a hidden second-floor ledge. Never any reason to risk both of us if I don't have to. Familiar noises surround me. Street vendors call out to passers-by, selling boiled goose eggs and fried dough and hot dogs. Attendants linger at the doors of grocery stores and coffee shops, trying to win customers over. A decades-old car rattles by. The second-shift workers are slowly making their way home. A few girls notice me and blush when I look at them. Boats chug around the lake, careful to avoid the giant water turbines churning along the edge, and the shore's flood sirens are quiet and unlit. Some areas are blocked off. These I steer clear of. The soldiers have marked them as quarantine zones. The loudspeakers that line the roofs of the buildings crackle and pop, and jumbotrons pause in their ads, or in some cases, warnings about another Patriot rebel attack, to show a video of our flag. Everyone stops in the streets and goes still as the pledge starts. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the great Republic of America, to our elector primo, to our glorious states, to unity against the colonies, to our impending victory. When the elector primo's name comes on, we salute toward the Capitol. I mumble the pledge under my breath, but stay silent the rest of the last two passages when the street police aren't looking my way. I wonder what the pledge sounded like before we went to war against the colonies. When the pledge ends, life resumes. I go to a Chinese-themed bar covered in graffiti. The attendant at the door gives me a wide smile that's missing several teeth and quickly ushers me in. "We have a real Tsingtao beer today," he murmurs. "Leftover cases from an imported gift sent straight to our glorious elector himself. Goes until 6 o'clock. His eyes dart around nervously as he says this. I just stare at him. Tsingtao beer? Yeah, right. My father would have laughed. The Republic didn't sign an import deal with China, or, as the Republic likes to claim, conquer China and take over its businesses, just to send quality imports to the slum sectors. More likely, this guy's pretty far behind in paying his bi-monthly government taxes. No other reason to risk slapping fake Tsingtao labels on bottles of his homebrew. I thank the man, though, and step inside. This is a good place as any to dig up information. It's dark. The air smells like pipe smoke and fried meat and gas lamps. I bump my way through the mess of tables and chairs, snatching food away from a couple of unguarded plates as I go, then stuffing it beneath my shirt until I reach the bar. Behind me, a large circle of customers are cheering on the skiz fight. Guess this bar tolerates illegal gambling. If they're smart, they'll be ready at any minute to bribe the street police with their winnings, unless they're willing to admit out loud that they're making tax-free money. The bartender doesn't bother to check my age. She doesn't even look at me. "What'll it be?" she asks. I shake my head. "Just some water, please," I say. Behind us, I hear a huge roar of cheers as one of the fighters goes down. She gives me a skeptical glance. Her eyes immediately shift to the bandage on my face. "What happened to your eye, kid?" "Terrace accident. I tend cows." She makes a disgusted face, but now she seems interested in me. "What a shame. You sure you don't want a beer to go with that? Must hurt." I shake my head again. "Thanks, cousin, but I don't drink. I like to stay alert." She smiles at me. She's kinda pretty in the flickering lamplight, with glittering green powder over her smooth-lidded eyes and a short black bobbed haircut. A vine tattoo snakes down her neck and disappears into her corseted shirt. A dirty pair of goggles, probably protection against bar fights, hangs around her neck. Kind of a shame. If I weren't busy hunting for information, I'd take my time with this girl. Chat her up, maybe get a kiss or three out of her. "Lake boy, yeah?" she asks. "Just decided to waltz in here and break a few girls' hearts? Or are you fighting?" She nods toward the skiz fight. I grin. "I'll leave that to you." What makes you think I fight? I nod at the scars on her arms and the bruises on her hands. She gives me a slow smile. I shrug after a moment. I wouldn't be caught dead in one of those rings. Just taking a break from the sun. You seem like nice company, you know? I mean, as long as you don't have the plague. A universal joke, but she still laughs. She leans on the counter. I live on the sector's edge. Pretty safe there so far. I lean toward her. You're lucky then. I grow serious. A family I know had their door marked recently. Sorry to hear it. I wanted to ask you something, just out of curiosity. You hear anything about a man around here in the last few days? Someone who says he has plague meds? She raises an eyebrow at me. Yeah, I heard about that. There's a bunch of people trying to find him. Do you know what he's been telling people? She hesitates for a moment. I notice that she has a few tiny freckles on her nose. I hear he's been telling people he wants to give a plague cure to someone, one person only, that this person will know who he's talking about. I try to look amused. Lucky person, yeah? She grins. No kidding. He said he wants this person to beat him at midnight, tonight, at the 10-second place. 10-second place? The bartender shrugs. Hell if I know what that means. Neither does anyone else for that matter. She leans over the counter toward me and lowers her voice. Know what I think? I think this guy's just crazy. I laugh along with her, but my mind is spinning. I have no doubt now that this person is searching for me. Almost a year ago, I broke into an Arcadia bank through the alley that runs behind it. One of the security guards tried to kill me. When he spat at me and told me I'd be cut to pieces by the bank vault's lasers, I taunted him. I told him that it would take me 10 seconds to break into that vault room. He didn't believe me. But the thing is, no one ever believes what I say until I actually end up doing it. I bought myself a nice pair of boots with that money, and even shopped for an electro bomb on the black market, a weapon that disables guns in its vicinity. Came in handy when I attacked the air base. And Tess got an entire outfit, brand new shirts and shoes and pants and bandages and rubbing alcohol, even a bottle of aspirin. We both got a good amount of food. The rest I gave to my family and other lake folks. After several more minutes of flirting, I say goodbye to the bartender girl and leave. The sun's still in the sky, and I can feel beads of sweat on my face. I know enough now. The government must have found something at the hospital and wants to lure me into a trap. They'll send a guy to the 10-second place at midnight, and then place soldiers along the back alley. I bet they think I'm real desperate. They'll probably also bring along plague meds, though, to tempt me out into the open. I press my lips together in thought. Then I change the direction I'm walking, off to the financial district. I have an appointment to keep. June. 23:29 hours, Putnam sector, 72 degrees Fahrenheit indoors. The lights in Batala Hall are cold and fluorescent. I dress in a bathroom on the observation and analysis floor. I'm wearing long black sleeves inside a striped black vest, slender black pants tucked into boots, and a long black robe that wraps around my shoulders and covers me like a blanket. A white stripe runs down the center of it all the way to the floor. A black mask covers my face, and infrared goggles shield my eyes. Other than that, all I have is a tiny microphone and an even tinier earpiece. And a gun, just in case. I need to look genderless, generic, unidentifiable. I need to look like a black market dealer, someone rich enough to afford plague cures. Matthias would have shaken his head at me. You can't just go alone on a classified mission, June, he would say. You might get hurt. How ironic. I tighten the clasp that holds my cloak in place. Steel sprayed with bronze, probably imported from West Texas, then head off toward the stairs that will take me outside Batala Hall and down toward the Acadia Bank where I'm supposed to meet Day. My brother has been dead for 120 hours. It already feels like forever. 70 hours ago, I gained clearance to search the internet and found out as much about Day as I could. 40 hours ago, I laid out a plan for tracking Day to Commander Jameson. 32 hours ago, she approved it. I doubt she even remembers what it is. 30 hours ago, I sent one scout to every plague-infected sector in Los Angeles, Winter, Blue Ridge, Lake, and Alta. They spread the word. Someone has plague medicine for you. Come to the 10-second place. 29 hours ago, I attended my brother's funeral. I do not plan on catching Date tonight. I don't even plan on seeing him. He'll know exactly where the 10-second place is, and that I'm either an agent sent by the government or by the black market dealers that pay taxes to the government. He's not going to show his face. Even Commander Jameson, who's testing me with this first task, knows we won't get a glimpse of him. But I know he's going to be there. He needs the plague meds desperately enough, and him showing up is all I hope for tonight. A clue, a starting point, a narrower direction, something personal about this boy criminal. I'm careful not to walk under the street lamps. In fact, I would have traveled by rooftop if I weren't going to the financial sector, where guards line the roofs. All around me, the jumbotrons blare their colorful campaigns, the sound of their ads distorted and jolty from the city speakers. One of them shows up in the updated profile of Day, this time featuring a boy with long black hair. Next to the jumbotrons are flickering streetlights, and under those walk crowds of night shift workers, police, and merchants. Every now and then, a tank rolls through, followed by several platoons of troops. They have blue stripes on their sleeves, soldiers back from the war front or soldiers rotating out to the war front. They keep their guns by their sides, with both hands on the weapon. They all look like Matthias to me, and I have to breathe a little harder, walk a little faster, anything to stay focused. I take the long way through the Batala, through the sector's side roads and abandoned buildings, not stopping until I'm a good distance outside of military grounds. The street police won't know I'm on a mission. If they see me dressed like this, equipped with infrared goggles, they'll question me for sure. The Acadia Bank lies on the quiet street. I go around the bank's backside until I'm standing in front of a parking lot at the end of an alleyway. There, I wait in the shadows. My goggles wash most of the color out of the scene. I look around and see rows of city speakers on the roofs, a stray cat whose tail twitches over the lid of a trash can, an abandoned kiosk with old anti-colonies bulletins tacked all over it. The clock on my visor says 23:53 hours. I pass the time by forcing myself to think through Day's history. Before the robbery at this bank, Day had already appeared on our records 3 times. Those were the only incidents where we found fingerprints. I can only guess at the number of other crimes he's committed. I take a closer look at the bank's alleyway. How did he break into this bank in 10 seconds, with 4 armed guards at the back entrance? The alley is narrow. He could have found enough footholds to jump his way up the walls to the 2nd or 3rd floors, all while using the guards' weapons against them. Probably got them to shoot at each other. Probably smashed through a window. That would have taken just a few seconds. What he did once he got inside, I have no idea. I already know how agile Day is. Surviving a 2.5-story fall proves that much. He won't have a chance to do that tonight, though. I don't care how light he is on his feet. You just don't jump out of buildings and then expect to be able to walk properly afterward. Day won't be scampering up walls and stairwells for at least another week. Suddenly, I tense up. It's 2 minutes past midnight. A clicking sound echoes from somewhere far away, and the cat sitting on the trash can makes a run for it. It could be a cigarette lighter, a gun trigger, the speakers, or a flickering streetlight. Could be anything. I scan the roofs. Nothing yet. But the hairs on the back of my neck rise. I know he's here. I know he's watching me. "Come out," I say. The tiny microphone at my mouth makes my voice sound like a man's. Silence. Not even the kiosk's layers of paper bulletins move. There's no wind tonight. I remove a vial from a holster at my belt. My other hand doesn't leave the handle of my gun. "I have what you need," I say, and wave around the vial for emphasis. Still nothing. This time, however, I hear what sounds like the faintest sigh. A breath. My eyes dart to the speakers lining the roofs. That's where the clicking sound was. He's rewired the speakers so he can talk to me without giving away his location. I smile behind my mask. It's what I would have done. "I know you need this," I say, gesturing again at the vial. I turn it in my hands and hold it higher. "It has all its official labels, the stamp of approval. I assure you it's the real thing." Another breath. Someone you care about will wish you'd come out to greet me. I look at the time on my goggles. It's 5 past midnight. I'll give you 2 minutes. Then I leave. The alley falls silent again. Every now and then, I hear another faint breath from the loudspeakers. My eyes shift from the time on my visor to the shadows off the roofs. He's clever. I can't tell where he's broadcasting from. Could be on this street, could be several blocks down from a higher floor. But I know he's close enough to see me himself. The time on my visor shows 0007 hours. I turn, tuck the vial back onto my belt, and start to walk away. What do you want for the cure, cousin? The voice is barely a whisper, but through the speakers, it sounds broken and startling, so cracky that I have trouble understanding him. Details race instantly through my mind. Male. He has a light accent. He's not from Oregon or Nevada or Arizona or New Mexico or West Texas or any other republic state. Native Southern Californian. He uses the familiar term cousin, something Lake Sector civilians often use. He's close enough to have seen me put the vial away. He's not so close that the speakers can catch his voice clearly. He must be on an adjacent block with a good vantage point, a high floor. Behind the details flashing through my mind emerges a black, rising hatred. This is the voice of my brother's murderer. This may have been the last voice my brother heard. I wait 2 seconds before speaking again. When I do, my voice is smooth and calm and shows no sign of my rage. What do you want? I ask him. It depends. Do you have money? 1,200 notes. Notes, the Republic gold. He robs the upper class, but doesn't have the ability to rob the extremely wealthy. He's probably a one-man operation. I laugh. 1,200 notes can't buy you this vial. What else do you have? Valuables? Jewelry? Silence. Or do you have skills to offer? As I'm sure you do. I don't work for the government. His weak point. Naturally. No offense, just thought I'd ask. And how do you know I don't work for someone else? Don't you think you're giving the government too much credit? A slight pause. Then the voice comes back. Your cloak knot. Don't know what it is, but it sure doesn't look civilian. This surprises me a little. My cloak knot is indeed a canto knot, a sturdy knot that military officials like to use. Apparently, Day has some detailed knowledge of how government uniforms look. Impressive eye. I'm quick to cover up my hesitation. Good to find another person who knows what a canto knot is, but I travel a lot, my friend. I see and know a lot of people who I might not be affiliated with. Silence. I wait, listening for another breath over the speakers. Nothing. Not even a click. I didn't act fast enough, and the brief hesitation in my voice was enough to convince him that he couldn't trust me. I tighten the cloak around me and realize that I've started to sweat in the warmth of the night. My heart hammers against my chest. Another voice sounds in my head. This time, it comes from my tiny earpiece. You there, I Paris? It's Commander Jameson. I can hear the buzz of other people in her office in the background. He left, I whisper, but he gave me clues. Tipped him off about whom you work for, didn't you? Well, it's your first time on your own. I have the recordings at any rate. See you back at the Batala Hall. Her rebuke stings a little. Before I can answer, the static cuts off. I wait for another minute, just to be sure I hadn't misread Day's exit. Silence. I turn and start back down the alley. I'd wanted to tell Commander Jameson what the easiest solution would be, simply round up everyone in the lake sector whose doors are marked. That would draw Day out of hiding. But I can already hear Commander Jameson's retort. Absolutely not, High Paris. It's far too expensive, and headquarters won't approve. You'll have to think of something else. I glance back once, half expecting to see the black-clad figure following me. But the alley is empty. I won't be allowed to force Day to come with me, which leaves me only one option. I'll have to go to him. Day. Eat something, yeah? Tessa's voice shakes me out of my vigil. I look away from the lake to see her holding out a piece of bread and cheese, gesturing for me to take it. I should be hungry. I've only eaten half an apple since my encounter with the strange government agent last night. But somehow, the bread and cheese, still fresh from the shop where Tess had traded a few precious notes for it, doesn't seem tempting. I take it anyway. Far be it for me to waste perfectly good food, especially when we should be saving everything we have for plague meds. Tess and I are sitting under the sand underneath a pier at the part of the lake that crosses into our sector. We keep ourselves pressed as closely against the side of the bank as we can idle so soldiers and drunk workers above can't see us past all the grass and rocks. We blend into the shadows. From where we sit, we can taste the salt in the air and see the lights of downtown Los Angeles reflected on the water. Ruins of older buildings dot the lake, buildings abandoned by businesses, owners, and residents when the floodwaters rose. Giant water wheels and turbines churn along the water's edge behind veils of smoke. This is probably my favorite view from our shabby, beautiful little lake sector. I take that back. It's my favorite and least favorite view. Because while the electric lights of downtown make for some nice sightseeing, I can also see the Trial Stadium looming off in the east. "You still have time," Tess says to me. She scoots close enough for me to feel her bare arm against mine. Her hair smells like bread and cinnamon from the shop. "Probably for a month or more. We'll find plague medicine before then, I'm sure of it." For a girl with no family and no home, Tess is surprisingly optimistic. I try to smile for her sake. "Maybe," I say. "Maybe the hospital let down its guard after a couple weeks." But in my heart, I know better. Earlier in the day, I risked a peek at my mother's house. The strange X still marked on the door. My mother and John seemed okay, at least strong enough to stand and walk around. But Eden? This time, Eden was lying in bed with a cloth on his head. Even from a distance, I could tell that he had already lost some weight. His skin looked wan. His voice sounded weak and hoarse. When I met John later behind our house, he told me that Eden hadn't eaten since the last time I came by. I reminded John to stay out of Eden's room when he could. Who knows how this cracked plague is spreading? John warned me not to pull any more stunts, so in case I get myself killed, I had to laugh at that. John won't ever say it to my face, but I know that I'm Eden's only chance. The plague might end Eden's life before he even gets to take the trial. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise. Eden would never have to stand outside our door on his 10th birthday, waiting for a bus to take him to the trial stadium. He'd never have to follow dozens of other children up the stadium stairs and into the inner circle, or run laps while trial admins study his breathing and posture, or answer pages and pages of stupid multiple-choice questions, or survive an interview in front of a half-circle of impatient officials. He'd never have to wait in one of several groups afterward, unsure which groups would return home and which groups would be sent off to these so-called labor camps. I don't know. If worst came to worst, maybe the plague would be a more merciful way to go. Eden always gets sick, I say after a while. I take a large bite of the bread and cheese. He almost died once when he was a baby. He caught some kind of pox and had fevers and rashes and cried nonstop for a week. The soldiers came close to marking our door, but it obviously wasn't the plague, and no one else seemed to have it. I shake my head. John and I never got sick. Tess doesn't smile this time. Poor Eden. After a pause, she continues. I was pretty sick when you first met me. Remember how grimy I looked? Suddenly, I feel guilty for talking about my problems so much over the last few days. At least I have a family to worry about. I put an arm around her shoulder. Yeah, you looked pretty awful. Tess laughs, but her eyes stay focused on the downtown lights. She leans her head on my shoulder. It's the way she's leaned against me since the very first week I knew her, when I spotted her in an alley in Nema sector. I still don't know what made me stop and talk to her that afternoon. Maybe the heat had made me soft, or maybe I was just in a good mood because I'd found a restaurant that had thrown out an entire day's worth of old sandwiches. Hey, I called out to her. 2 more heads popped out in the garbage bin. I flinched in surprise. 2 of them, an older woman and a teenage boy, immediately scrambled out of the mess and ran down the alley. The third, a girl who couldn't have been more than 10 years old, stayed where she was, trembling when she saw me. She was as skinny as a rail, with a tattered shirt and trousers. Her hair was short and blunt, cut off abruptly right below her chin, and red in the sunlight. I waited for a moment, not wanting to scare her like I had the others. "Hey," I said again. "Mind if I join you?" She stared back at me without a word. I could barely make out her face because of all the soot on it. When she didn't reply, I shrugged and started walking toward her. Maybe I could salvage something useful from the bin. The instant I got within 10 feet of the girl, she let out a strangled cry and darted away. She ran so fast that she tripped, falling onto the asphalt on her hands and knees. I limped over to her. My old knee injury was worse back then, and I remember stumbling in my rush. "Hey," I said, "you all right?" She jerked away and held up her scratched hands to shield her face. "Please," she said. "Please, please." "Please what?" Then I sighed, embarrassed by my irritation. Already I could see tears welling up in her eyes. "Stop crying. I'm not going to hurt you." I knelt down beside her. At first, she whimpered and started to crawl away, but when I didn't move, she paused to stare at me. Both of her knees had the skin ripped right off them, and the flesh underneath was scarlet and raw. "You live close by?" I asked her. She nodded. Then, as if she had remembered something, she shook her head. "No," she said. "Can I help you get home?" "I don't have a home." "You don't? Where are your parents?" She shook her head again. I sighed and dropped my canvas bag to the ground, then held out a hand to her. "Come on," I said. "You don't want 2 infected knees. I'll help you clean them up, and then you can be on your way again. You can have some of my food, too. Pretty good deal, right?" It took her a long time to put her hand in mine. "Okay," she whispered, so softly that I could barely hear her. That night, we camped out behind a pawn shop that had a pair of old chairs and a ripped-up couch lying in its alley. I cleaned the girl's knees with alcohol stolen from a bar, letting her bite down on a rag so she wouldn't shriek and draw attention to us. Other than when I was tending to her scrapes, she never let me get near her. Whenever I had my hand accidentally brushed her hair or bumped her arm, she would flinch as if burned by steam from a kettle. Finally, I just gave up trying to talk to her. I let her have the couch while I laid out my shirt as a pillow and tried to get comfortable on the pavement. "If you want to leave in the morning, just go," I said to her. "You don't have to wake me up to say goodbye or anything." My eyelids were growing heavy, but she stayed awake, staring unblinking at me, even as I fell asleep. She was still there in the morning. She followed me around as I scavenged in garbage bins, picking out old clothes and edible bits of leftover food. I tried asking her to leave. I even tried shouting at her. An orphan would be a huge inconvenience. But although I made her cry a few times, when I looked over my shoulder, she'd still be there, trailing me a short distance away. 2 nights later, as we sat together by a crude fire, she finally spoke to me. "My name is Tess," she whispered. Then she studied my face, like she wanted to guess my reaction. I only shrugged. "Good to know," I said. And that was that. Tess bolts out of her sleep. Her arm whacks my head. "Ouch!" I mutter as I rub my forehead. Pain runs through my healing arm, and I hear the silver bullets Tess took from my clothes clink together in my pocket. If you wanted to wake me up, you could have just tapped me. She holds a finger to her lips. Now I'm on the alert. We're still sitting underneath the pier, but it's probably a couple hours before dawn, and the skyline has already gone dark. The only light comes from several antique street lamps lining the edge of the lake. I glance at Tess. Her eyes glint in the darkness. "Did you hear something?" she whispers. I frown. Usually, I can hear something suspicious before Tess does, but this time, I hear nothing at all. We both stay still for a long moment. I hear the occasional lap of waves, the churning sound of metal pushing water, now and then a passing car. I look at Tess again. "What did you hear the first time?" "It sounded like something gurgling," she whispers. Before I can think much about it, I hear footsteps and then a voice approaching the pier above us. We both shrink farther into the shadows. It's a man's voice, and his footsteps sound oddly heavy. I realize a second later that the man is walking in step with someone else, a pair of street police. I push myself farther back against the bank, and some of the loose dirt and rocks give way. They roll silently down into the sand. I keep pushing until my back hits the surface of something hard and smooth. Tess does the same. "There's something brewing," one of the police says. "Plague's popped up in the zine sector this time." Their footsteps clomp overhead, and I see their figures walking along the back of the beginning of the pier. Off in the distance, the first signs of light are turning the horizon into a murky gray. "I've never heard of the plague showing up there. Must be a stronger strain. What are they going to do?" I try to hear what the other policeman has to say, but by now, the two have walked far enough that their voices have turned to murmurs. I take a deep breath. The zine sector is a good 30 miles away from here, but what if the strange red mark on my mother's door means that they're infected with this new strain? And what will the elector do about it? "Day," Tess whispers. I look at her. She turns against the bank so that her back now faces out toward the lake. She points at the deep indent we've made in the bank. When I turn around, I see what she's pointing to. The hand surface I'd had my back against is actually a sheet of metal. When I brush away more of the dirt and rocks, I see that the metal is lodged deep in the bank, so that it's probably what's holding the bank up in the first place. I squint at the surface. Tess looks at me. "It's hollow." "Hollow?" I put my ear against the ice-cold metal. A wave of noise hits me, the gurgling and hissing sound that Tess heard earlier. It isn't just a metal structure to hold up the lake's shores. When I pull it away from it and look closer at the metal, I notice symbols carved on its surface. One of these is the Republic's flag, imprinted faintly against the metal. Another is a small red number, 318.